All right, welcome back. We're back with access control. If you remember from our previous lesson, we had gone through the access control model, CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability, and then actually we talked about identification, authentication, access control, authorization, and auditing. Okay, now so let's go a little bit deeper in access control. Really, it's all about the data. It's always been about the data, or really it's about the information. That's what we want to control access to. So when we think about access control, you got to think about it from a multi-spectral environment. Here's what I mean. Because we have personnel, we have humans who want to access our data. We have end user devices. Many times, these that the users personnel may be using these, but some of these may have scripts set up automatically to run that may try to get here. We've got IT systems and personnel, and we have to have access control to facilities. So there's a physical aspect to access control. There's a privileged user aspect to too many A's to access control. We can be concerned about the end user devices, and really here from an insider threat is personnel. How do we control access to our information? The first thing we have to understand, and this is important, okay? Because especially if you're just starting to kind of get into the cyber environment, is understanding subjects, objects, and access. Because that terminology, you're going to see it multiple places. And if you don't quite grasp it, you're going to get a little confused. And then you're going to come back and blame me because I didn't explain it well. And we don't want that to happen. All right, so what is the subject? A subject is an active entity that accesses a passive object to receive information from or data about an object. Okay, that all sounds, kind of really techie and whoop-de-doo. Think about a subject as a human, all right? Look at it this way. Think about your refrigerator as an object and you, the human, as the subject. That refrigerator is full of stuff that you want to get to. It's just stuff sitting there. You, the human, you, the subject, you're the one that walks to the door, opens it up, and stands there in your pajamas for 5 minutes looking, trying to figure out what you want. You're the subject accessing an object. So an object is a passive entity that provides information to a subject. So here again, subject, something that's active, me, active. An object, something that's passive, refrigerator. Now let's put this into more of a digital frame. A spreadsheet, okay? We have a spreadsheet. I think most of us should be familiar with spreadsheets. In that spreadsheet, we have a cell that has name or last name, first name, middle initial, phone number, address. All these are different cells within a spreadsheet. Social security number, such things. Those are data objects because they are passive, meaning that they're just sitting there in a row, in a cell or in a tuple of a spreadsheet. Now, when someone tries to access that spreadsheet and extract information from it, that would be the subject. Subject, active entity, object, passive entity. So what are we doing? We are trying to control access. And what is access? That's the transfer of an information object to a subject. So here again, back to the refrigerator. I'm standing here in front of the refrigerator. I'm an active subject standing in front of this passive object. And now access is when I reach in and I grab, the leftover pizza and I transfer it to the table. So now I have transferred, I've actually accessed something in that refrigerator. Subjects, active, objects, passive entity. And why is this important? Because when we think about security in depth and how we control access, security in depth is just think layers. That's all. Layers. Many times our home could be a security in depth. Why? We can have a fence on the outside. We got a fence with a gate. That's one layer. If you're authorized to go through the fence, then you come to the front door. Another layer. You're authorized to go through the front door, then there may be another door in the hallway. And then another door to get to the bedroom. So you see the layers. That's all security in depth, or you may hear it called defense in depth, what it is. So in this model, what we're talking about, that we have some data. We have some critical information that's sitting in some files or in folders. That is the secret sauce. That's what we're trying to protect. Now, here's a question I love asking our new ISOs, our new cyber people when they come in, because many of them are on fire. They've been to school. They got all the technical knowledge. But I'll always ask them this question: what's the secret sauce? Where's the golden egg? That's what I ask. Where's the golden egg? What are we trying to protect? And the answer most of the time, well, this computer, I'm trying to protect these servers. No, we're not. We don't really care about the computers and servers. Well, we do, but really it's the information that's on those hard drives that's being stored. That's what we're trying to protect. So when you look at a security boundary or whatever, always ask yourself the question, what is it that I'm really trying to protect in here? Okay? That is what I draw the circle around. That's the golden egg. So let's say in this analogy, I've got some critical data that's sitting on a file. Well, those files, they're probably on a server somewhere. That's the hardware that this file and this data is stored on. To get to that server is probably plugged into a switch, a network device, another layer back. That network device may be connected to a router or some other core switch or some type of what we call a layer 3 device. Not important right now. We'll talk about that later on in some later classes. And here is my computer that's connected to that device, that connects to this device, that connects to this device, that connects to there. Now you see there's multiple layers, because here I could have firewall rules set up, access controls. I could be on separate VLANs. I know these are some techie terms if you're not there yet, but it's okay. I can have multiple technical controls set up here, as well as when I hit here, I have user accounts. And so what I'm trying to do is set up layered defenses. If I'm an authorized user, I should be authorized to make it through this box, where I've probably got my firewalls, where my network team has set up firewalls. So, yep, this computer and that user is authorized to get here. He's also authorized to be on this virtual LAN, on this local area network. Authorized to have an account on that system. And he has been given access to these files that are in this folder. So you see how many layers that we have? Those layers are there for a reason. Why? Because we want to protect unauthorized our information from being exploited, the risk formula, from being exploited by unauthorized users. So let's say I may have an unauthorized, some type of adversary who's sitting outside of my network trying to hack in. Well, I should have rules put in place here at this device that only allows authorized people. So that individual is blocked there. I may have somebody within my organization. Okay, they could make it through here, but they may not still be authorized to get here as well. So they may be blocked inside the organization on a network device that blocks them. I may have an individual that may even have rights on the same server. He's in the organization. He should be there. He's got an account here. So I can block them here as well, so that only the right individuals should have accounts. So even if they're there, has an account, still doesn't mean that they have access to all the files and all the critical data. So at each of these points, that's where I have checks and balances in place to be sure that authorized users make it through, unauthorized users are blocked. Authorized user makes it through, an unauthorized user is blocked. Unauthorized user comes in, has an account. Unauthorized users should not have an account, even if that individual is in my organization and may even be in the section or the department we work in. And then here, this is that last realm of protection, that even if you get all the way to here, we should have what we call different types of access controls, like discretionary access control or mandatory access controls, that says that no, you cannot get there because you're not authorized. Security in depth, defense in depth. This is how we control access in a layered environment. And why do we do that? You remember I always say, I can teach you the how, but here's the why. Years ago, when we first started thinking of this thing with cyber and networking, we were kind of using what we call the moat model. Means that we drew a big circle around our network. We put these firewalls in place, that nobody can get through it. Kind of like in the days with the kings and castles, right? They dig a big moat and build a big wall around the castle and try to keep the enemy out. Well, what we've come to realize, especially with insider threat, that the enemy is already inside of our network. So no longer can we just put a big wall around the network and think we're good. So now we have to be sure that we put partitions, we put firewalls at different places in the network in a layered perspective so that we can hopefully mitigate the threat of an insider threat, someone who's actually authorized to get inside the wall and protect against that. That's the why. That's why security in depth is so important. And that we have to think in that perspective at all times. Now, we talked about access control methods. These are three of the kind of major methods that we talk about: mandatory access control, discretionary access control, role-based access control. And there are some others. There's rule-based and some others. But for the purpose of keeping it simple, we're just gonna talk about these three: mandatory, MAC; discretionary, DAC; role-based, RBAC. That's what those mean, if you've seen those in your Security Plus training. So what is mandatory access control? You see this really around the government, around the military, those types of places. Mandatory access control means that you have to have the right, it's based on labels, meaning that if I have a top secret document, I can only read that document if I have a top secret clearance, okay? Like I say, it's rules for access and are configured by the security and enforced by the operating system of those machines. Decisions based on security labels, whether it's classified, confidential, secure, secret, top secret, etc., whatever it may be. And then we use MAC, like I say, where classification and confidentiality is of the utmost importance. So, and the thing about mandatory access control, it doesn't matter if I created a document, if I just can't arbitrarily give access to that document if the individual who wanted to receive it do not have the right security label. I can work in an environment where I've just created a secret document. However, my wife, who I work with, she only has access to confidential information. I cannot give her access to confidential information unless she has secret. That means that's what that means, no read up. If I'm sitting here, I can't read anything up higher than where my security clearance is. Likewise, no write down, meaning that if I have a document that's top secret, I cannot arbitrarily write it down to secret. Only the classification authority can do that. So no read up, no write down. Mandatory access controls, secret, top secret, those things. So let's talk about role-based access control. Also called, sometimes we call it non-discretionary, okay? Now, role-based, that is based on your role in an organization, you are given access. It determines how subjects and objects interact based on the controls we put in place based on their roles. It doesn't give rights directly to an individual. Instead, it gives it to a role. Here's what I mean. So let's say in your organization, you are a system administrator, a domain system administrator. When you come into the organization, you were hired for that role. And what they do, they're going to put you in a group of system administrators, a system administrator group, not based on just you, but by the fact that you were put in that group. Now you're given certain privileges because you're in the group, which means that now you have access to certain objects based on your role, not because of you as a great individual, but because of the role that you perform in the organization. Role-based access control. Now, the one that is used quite a bit in a lot of organizations is DAC. You hear it called DAC, discretionary access control. Discretionary means that information, resources are given to individuals at the discretion of the person who created it or the data owner, based on the discretion of the data owner. And we build these with what we call access control lists within the operating system. This is a snapshot out of a Windows system that shows that, okay, we got a document that was created. Now the information owner, they can provide the permissions. They can give people full control. You can be able to read it, write it, do certain things to it, but it's up to the information owner who can provide that level of access. Is at their discretion. Discretionary access control. So like I said, we got mandatory access control, role-based access control, and discretionary access control. All right, let's talk about now really quickly some identification and authentication management. We're still in that same vein of identification, authentication, access control, authorization, and auditing. So when we think about this, like I said, identification involves the users presenting his or her credentials to a system. Like we talked about before, it could be your username. Okay, it could be a card. You know, you may have a token that you would put in. Authentication that validates the identity. If you work in an organization where you have a token, right, you may slide that card in and it identifies you, but you still would have to type in like a PIN to before you're given access. So when we think about that, we have to work with what we call authentication factors. How are you able to be authenticated on a network? Multiple ways. These are the top three. These are the three you're going to see all the time. Something you know, something you have, something you are. So when we talk about something that you know, that's a password or a PIN, a personal identification number, a PIN. Something you know. I mean, I know a password. It's up here. It's up here in the gray matter. Something you have. Something you have could be an ID card, a key, a fob, you know, a token of some type. And something that you are, that is, most of the time we're talking biometrics, fingerprints, retinal scans, facial scans, those type things. Those are the three basic identification factors. Now, are there more? Yes, there are. There are somewhere that you are. And more businesses are starting to use this, so especially with mobile devices and laptops, meaning that you can only use that laptop within a certain geographic location. Okay, so it's geotag. So if I want to take my laptop home, once I move outside of a certain geographical location, that laptop will no longer be able to authenticate to the network. Something you do, that's another one that's used quite a bit, or starting to be used more. You know, keystroke patterns, things like that. So yeah, but these are the three, these are the big ones. Now, what we always want to try to do is use multi-factor authentication, MFA. You may see that, MFA, multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor is I want to use more than one, something out of more than one category. So here's what I mean. Let's say I type in a username and a password. Would that be multi-factor authentication? What do you think? No, it wouldn't, because both of those are something that I know. Okay, but let's say I have a token, a card, and I slide my card in and then have to type in a PIN. What about that? Is that multi-factor or single factor? I'll give you a chance to think about it and answer. I think I heard somebody in Des Moines, Iowa just say multi-factor. And guys, you are correct. That is multi-factor. I'm using something that I have, an ID card, and I'm using something that I know, a password. Or the same thing, okay, let's say that, you know, I'm using biometrics where I work, and I come in and they do a scan of my retina or my thumb, you know, thumbprint. That's something that I am, something that I am. But at the same time, after that, I have to type in a PIN, something that I know. Multi-factor authentication. Now, something you may also see, especially if you're studying for a certification, something like that, is mutual authentication. Mutual authentication means that you have to authenticate both ways. That I'm going to authenticate to the server, and then the server is also going to authenticate back to the machine that I'm on. Mutual authentication. Just kind of threw that in there for you. Now, some things to consider with authentication, with these authentication factors, all right? Especially if you're talking password, how to create strong passwords and passphrases. You know, our technical environment, the industries, we're really trying to move away from passwords, okay, to where we go with, you know, either token or other types of identification factors. But if you still are using passwords, things to be considered with. One is the password age. How old is your password? How long before it gets reset? Every 60 days, every 90 days, whatever that may be. The password complexity. How complex? Do I have to have uppercase, lowercase, alphanumeric, and one special character? Password length. Can it be 7 characters, 15 characters, 25 characters, indefinite? And password history. How many times can I use, can I go before I can reuse the same password? Now, here's where you have to balance things with password. To hit the sweet spot of security. Okay, I can make passwords so complex that they'd be very difficult for someone to exploit them. But if I do that, it's going to be so frustrating for the workforce to use that system every day that then you know what they're going to start doing? Is going to start writing them down and putting them under the keyboard. So all the things that all the security mitigations that I put in place, I've just kicked them to the curb because people are writing down their passwords. So you have to find a balance between operations or usability and security. There's always that balance. We can secure something to death, but if it's no longer usable, what good is it? So you want to find that sweet spot when you're dealing with passwords and passphrases. Smart card and tokens, always good to do. Like I say, it uses encryption, public key encryption. Yeah, we call it PKI. Now, thinking with these are not the saviors of the world. Why? Because they get lost. Encryption keys can get compromised. So there are things to always consider there as well. Biometrics. I know, if you watch a lot of movies, Hollywood and all those, we all think, oh my God, biometrics, that's got to be the most secure thing ever. Well, not really, okay? There are always things to consider when you talk about fingerprinting, facial recognitions, retina scans, because hand geometry, there's all different types. But you're probably asking, well, why do you say these are not as secure as you may think they are? Okay, think about this. All of these methods, once they get inside of the computer, once they go in, they turn into ones and zeros, and many times they are hashed, meaning that they're converted to a number string, so that the next time you come there, next time you input that password or token or do the scan, it's going to compare that number with the one that's stored on the computer. So it doesn't matter if I use a password, if I use a token, if I use biometrics, my password file on that computer is still ones and zeros. It can still be spoofed, okay? Another thing with biometrics, we always have to be concerned with error rates, whether it's a type 1 error or a type 2. A type 1 is a false rejection rate. Okay, well, type 1 occurs when a valid subject is not authenticated, meaning that I'm authorized to get here, I scan, and for whatever reason, the machine just can't pick up my eye pattern today or my thumbprint today. Type 2 error, that's when an invalid subject is authenticated, meaning that I am trying to spoof this system and it lets me in. So, this is the type 2 error is the one that we really want to be sure we protect against. A type 1 error, this is an irritant, meaning that if you work in an organization and you keep getting false rejects, that is an irritant. Type 2, that is a security breach. So just something to be aware of with biometrics. Now, when we talk about getting access or authentication, there's a lot of different type of technologies out there. One that I like to kind of explain is what we call Kerberos. This is used in a lot of networks to provide authentication from subjects to objects, Okay, let's talk about this. Here, there's several components to Kerberos. Going to kind of walk through these briefly. You got your KDC, your Key Distribution Center. That's the database. It's your authentication server. It's what we call a ticket granting system. Don't get too hung up here yet. Just remember those acronyms. Now, what is that? Within that, like I say, your authentication server, that is what performs your client authentication. Okay, that's what issues a ticket. Now, your ticket granting server, that's what takes the ticket and provides you service. And the client, that's the computer or the individual that wants to get to the information. All right, so let's walk through this really quickly. What are we talking about here? So here's a client, right? This client, this individual at a computer, this computer system wants to get to a file that's on that server. However, to get there, it needs to be authenticated, because how does this server know that this client is authorized to get to that? All right, so here's what happens. The client goes to the authentication server and say, hey, authenticate me. That usually happens many times when you first log on to a system and you get authenticated, okay, and you log on with your username and password. And so that authentication server says, yes, I know who you are, and I'm going to give you a TGT, a ticket granting ticket. You might sound, that sounds, pretty crazy. All right, but then, all right, now your client takes that TGT and it take it over to the ticket granting server, and the ticket granting server takes that ticket and goes, ah, yes, you've been authenticated. Here, I'm going to give you a service ticket. Now, he takes that service ticket and goes to the server, and the server looks at it and says, yes, you are authenticated. Here's the file you want. Really, here, if you haven't noticed, I love analogies. To me, this is analogous to going to an amusement park, Six Flags or Busch Gardens or wherever it may be. All right, when you first get there, you walk up to the gate, and they want to see your ID, and they want to see all these things, and they want their money. But then they give you a ticket to get you into the park. Right here. You've just been authenticated to go into the park. Great. But I want to go ride a ride. I want to get on that roller coaster that's going to scare me to death. Well, to get on that roller coaster, I had to have some other tickets. When I was there, they say, well, here's the tickets you have so you can go ride. So now I've been authenticated, but now they give me TGTs. So now I go to the little guy who has a summer job of standing there taking tickets to get on the roller coaster. That he is my ticket granting server. He takes that ticket and says, great, now go stand in that line for an hour and a half and you'll make it to the roller coaster. So then when I get up to the roller coaster, the guy knows that I'm good because I've already been authenticated at the front gate, and the guy who's checking tickets at the roller coaster have authenticated me. So he lets me get onto the roller coaster and puts a little thing down so I can go and scream and throw my hands in the air. So that's just really how Kerberos works. Think about it just like going to an amusement park. So authentication server, it gives you a TGT. You take the TGT to the ticket granting server. It says, I know who you are. Then you take that to the information resource that allows you to get to the files. Another part of identity management that is becoming more and more popular is what we call single sign-on. Without single sign-on, let's say if you got 4 servers or 4 places you need to get to at your job, you would have to have a login to each one of those to get there. So throughout the day, you may have to log in 5 or 6 times just to get all this different information. Single sign-on, what that does, it says, okay, you sign on to me one time, and now I will control the sign-on to all of these individual servers and services. Now, I will say there's conveniences here, but likewise, there are some security concerns. Here's why. With a single sign-on, let's say if my password or my authenticator is compromised, now someone has access to all of that information. Here, hopefully, that when they did their general user training, they told them, hey, do not use the same password on all these servers. So you may have separate passwords. So I may lose this password. It may be compromised. Somebody gets there, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to get to these others because I'm using different authenticators. All right, we've covered a lot of material. Here's the last thing I'm going to talk about, and probably one of the most important is controlling accounts, the account process. One of the first things you do when somebody comes into your organization, you have to provision an account. This is the creation of a new account and giving them the right privileges. We talked about mandatory access control, role-based access control, discretionary. This is where it starts right here. So when new individuals come into your organization, you should know the role that they have, and that way you can grant them the right accesses with their account. That's the account provisioning process. Now, on a periodic basis, we should also be reviewing these accounts. Why? Because that individual who came 3 years ago, they may have moved to somewhere else within the organization and do not need the same roles and accesses. So that's where at least annually, you should be reviewing accounts to be sure that everybody still are in the place they need to be. The last part of this is deprovisioning. This is very important. What happens when a person leaves your organization? That account, we should be disabled as soon as possible. Now, many times it's very easy, like say, when somebody leaves the organization because they're out process. What happens when people move within your organization to another department? That's part of that deprovisioning that should be attached to your account review process. All right, so we've covered a lot of things. We're going to take a little break here. We're going to come back in another section. And yes, I have a quiz for you. I didn't say that up front. Sorry. But yes, we're going to have a quiz. So hope to see you right back for the next lesson.